Hi, and welcome to On the Line. And I'm your host, Britton NewOne Carter. Before we get into our tonight's show, I'd like to remind you as how to follow us. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at On the Line TV Show. You can also hang out with us on Twitter at Watch On the Line. Tonight we have with us a very special guest. I mean, this guy is special to me. Got a chance, an opportunity to see this guy when he was coming up through the ranks as a young attorney, and even before then as a young adult in our community. Mr. Rodney Harris is our special guest tonight.
Thank you so much for having me on, Brent.
Rodney, thanks for being here.
Happy to be
thanks
here.
For being here. You know, this show here tonight is really close to my heart, particularly because I've known you for so many years.
Yes, sir.
And I've had the opportunity to watch Mr. Harris as he's grown through the years, and just see this guy just claw his way to the top, and he's still clawing his way to the top. Rodney, just a little history on you. His educational background is that of Pleasant Ridge Elementary School.
Pleasant Hill Elementary School in College Hill, North Bend Road. Proud. Proud of it.
He's proud of that one.
Yes, sir.
Walnut Hills High School, Eagles.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And he has a bachelor's from Central State University.
For God, for Central, for State.
Listen to this. And a Juris Doctor from University of Louisville.
Yes, sir.
Cardinals.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Home of my cousin, Daryl Griffin.
Okay.
Okay. His employment history is extensive, quite extensive. Your current role, of course, is the Director of Public Defender's Office, Felony Division, correct?
That's correct.
Great. So why don't you, Rodney, give me a little bit of the rest of your background, your history, employment, and also some of the earlier things that have happened to you earlier in life.
Okay. Well, as I started out, I'm very proud to be from Cincinnati. This is my hometown. I feel like this is my city. This is my place. So when I talk about Pleasant Hill and Walnut Hills, it's something that's very dear to me. I'm a College Hill kid, grew up, born and raised.
Right.
Family, my parents still live there.
Right.
And like you said, I went to Walnut Hills. From there, I went on to Central State and then on to University of Louisville. As I was finishing at the University of Louisville, I moved back to Covington. My grandmother had passed away, and I moved back to Covington and was commuting from Covington to Louisville. And right around that time, I had a family member that had some difficulty and made some poor choices and was actually going through a criminal case. And what happened with it was it kind of led me into, because I initially went to law school with an interest in being a sports agent.
Okay.
And having dealt with my cousin's criminal case, I was following it. I was back home, living in Covington. I can go over to the courthouse. I developed an interest in criminal law. Okay. And that led to me actually getting hired with Lawson and Associates to start, and then Lawson and Gaines, Ken Lawson and Leslie Isaiah Gaines.
Right.
And that really kind of started my interest in criminal defense, of course, but also public service. Because back then, you can remember when Lawson and Associates and Lawson and Gaines were really active in the community.
Right.
I kind of cut my teeth back in '97.
Right.
With the Lorenzo Collins shooting. And that was the gentleman that was holding a brick that I think got out of the mental health ward at the hospital and was shot by some officers. Exactly. And was actually in the office and cutting out the styrofoam bricks that we were protesting with at City Hall and that kind of thing. And was there for about a year, a little over a year, and then I opened up my own office. And had been practicing in private practice for about 16 years after I left Lawson and Associates. Was real big at mentoring younger attorneys when I was doing my own private thing. At best, I had about 5 different attorneys in my office with me. A lot of it I was kind of, like I said, mentoring, kind of showing the ropes, trying to give back, same thing that Les Gaines and Ken Lawson did for me and Bill Alukta and some other attorneys that were kind of like role models for me.
Right.
So in my own practice, I was practicing throughout the state of Ohio and in federal court. I had a focus on criminal law, but I did a lot of civil stuff, civil rights stuff, Social Security and so forth. And the things that I'm most proud of is I've developed a reputation of being a strong advocate, very good trial attorney, and was well respected. And that led to me kind of being offered the position. And I was really active, and you know me, Britton, really active with the youth, and youth sports and youth football. and had founded an organization, Vikings Youth Athletics, youth football and cheerleading program. And it was through some of that work that I really seen a difference in my life. And what happened specifically was when we were coaching, what we would do each season is we would read a book. And the idea was we were mentoring the kids, but we were also mentoring the younger coaches. Because I was an older parent, didn't start having kids until I was in my early 30s. So that was our goal. And the book that really had an effect on me was a book by the name of Season of Life by Jeffrey Marks. And the whole gist of the book was life isn't about your personal accolades and your accomplishments, but it's about being there, being a man for others and your effect on others. And for me, the timing was such that I had been in private practice at that point about 13 to 14 years. I was successful. I lectured nationally. I lectured on a state level. Like I said, well respected. But it was one of those points in my life where I began to look at what would my legacy be? I wanted to expand my footprint and the effect that I had on people in the community. And that book kind of motivated me that way. And right around that time, that public defender's office job came open, and I began to look at how I could really affect our community, really affect other people if I took over that directorship job. Because, you know that public defenders haven't always had the best reputation.
They absolutely haven't.
And although, we have a long ways to go, I'm the first to recognize that. We've made some great strides. So, got into the office and started to do, small things, implement policy and protocol with the attorneys, with the whole idea of raising a level of indigent defense in the county because it's important. Because when you don't have proper defense, it affects the bottom line, your finances. If people who shouldn't be locked up are being locked up, somebody's paying for that. Okay? We can't lock people up, forever. So again, you got to make sure that they're being represented properly, that, the system is working properly. And for that work, I was awarded the 2016 Greater Cincinnati Criminal Defense Attorneys Award. So I'm very proud of that.
And let me just interject this. You bring up some great points. And just as you were talking, I was flashing back to the earlier days, particularly the days when they had the old Arms and Deputy building and courts were held there. And you would see countless and countless of black African Americans in these cages and struggling for a defense attorney. And for many of us, even when it shifted over to the Justice Center, what you found and what I saw a lot of was that there wasn't many black attorneys to choose from. And for the most part, some of the mindset was, which one is going to provide me the best defense? Which one is not just going to take the pro bono salary and move on? And you happen to be, and it's not really necessary for you to say that that you're respected because you are. The community says that.
I appreciate that.
The community says that. The voices in those cells say that.
I appreciate that.
When they talk about defense attorneys, they talk about Rodney Harris.
I appreciate that.
Because, our families look to provide the best defense for our fellow family members that fall victim. And there are a lot of times they're indigent, the point that you very well brought up. So yeah. And that brings me back also to the John Bellews and the Houstons. I'm quite sure that even though some of your mentors have been Ken Lawson and whatnot, and Leslie Gaines, I'm quite sure you had to really get motivated, some motivation from those guys, because it was only a handful of really prominent black attorneys in the city.
Well, you got to know your history. You got to know where you come from. You got to know the struggle. And, it's always a lot more that I can learn, but I pride myself on kind of knowing the history. And as we sit here now, in 214 years since Hampton County had the Common Pleas Court incepted, just understanding our history, we've only had 6 General Division Common Pleas judges that were African American. In 200 years. You had Judge McClain, you had Judge Sherman, then Judge Marsh, Judge West, Nadine Allen, Judge Nadine Allen, and Judge William Mallory. And that's the extent of the African American Common Pleas judges that we had in Hamilton County. And it's mind-boggling when you talk about a county this diverse and for that amount of time.
And it's also mind-boggling when you look to for a fair trial. for a fair trial.
Yeah.
You almost go in with a defeated attitude.
Well, see, what people got to understand is, and I think judges do their best to try to be fair, but what makes up decision process is perception and experiences.
Okay.
And that's why it's so important. Growing up in College Hill, growing up in a middle income family, my generation was the first to go to college in my family.
Right.
It's a different perspective and a different point of view than someone who may have grown up in Mount Adams or growing up in Indian Hill. It's a different, street sense. It's a different compassion. It's a different empathy. And all those things are necessary when you're talking about judging our community, because everyone hasn't had, a pillow to lay on every night. Some that had to sleep on the floor.
That's right.
And you got to have that perspective and point of view in my mind, and so that you can be fair across the board. Because, every sentence doesn't call for jail time. Every case doesn't call for jail time.
Right.
You got to have the appropriate empathy and compassion and look at each case individually. And I think that's what the diversity of my experience has done.
Right.
Is give me that ability.
Right. And Rodney, our community is bustling at the seams with so much violence.
Yep.
And some of the violence that's not really spoken of is the violence of the ongoing PTSD
Yep.
that we allow, to run rampant in our communities.
Yep.
Many times it's my fear that some of the defendants are misjudged. They're misdiagnosed. Can you speak to that?
Well, I can absolutely speak to it. If you just think and look at it in common sense wise, and when you say PTSD, you're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder.
Exactly.
When our soldiers go to war or violent incidents, a lot of times they don't come back as the same person because of what they've seen.
Right.
When our police officers go to work every day and they see some of the things that they've seen, some of them need help, mental health help. So, it just goes to follow that if we have young people that are seeing some of the violence that are in our communities, and they're seeing it every day, day in and day out, and it's not being treated, they're not given mental health resources and those kind of things, that affects their future. And we're talking about kids that are young and impressionable, and the examples that I gave early on was of adults whose bodies and minds have matured. Right. So just think about a child that's maturing, that's witnessing some of this stuff, it's not being treated, and how they respond and how they react to it varies. So again, you can't say for every specific case that, that kid suffered from PTSD and that's why he's behaving, but it's something, again, that we have to consider. It's something that, as a man of compassion, as a man of empathy, you got to kind of look and put yourself in their position. And again, the law is the law and you got to follow the law. But, you got to have compassion for your fellow human beings too. I think that's an important part that a lot of times gets left out.
Right. Conservative city, Cincinnati.
Absolutely.
So is Cincinnati ready for a judge with that type of compassion?
I think we have to be. As we sit here right now, one of the things that I can't say as I sit here today, I believe we're still at an emergency level in the crowding of our local jail. But we have to look at different ways of handling our system. We have to find a better way. Again, part of what we deal with now is we'll have the sheriff release nonviolent offenders, okay? That person will come back to court, haven't gotten any trouble, come back to court on time, and a lot of times they're coming back to court and getting a bond put on them. Right. Well, that's a wasted bed for a violent offender. Now, again, if there's other reasons for it, other than, no, I just think that someone needs to have some stock in the game. Again, look at whether the community is safer by that person using up that jail bed. We got to look at things a different way because the way we've been doing it obviously has us in the difficulty that we're in now. So again, the law is the law, but I think you got to look at things through different perspectives. And coming from a background of being a criminal defense and also a civil lawyer, I think it gives me a little bit different view because most of our judges come from that prosecutor, that magistrate background. And, I think that just that change of pace may make a difference in a positive way.
Yeah, and it's great that you say that because, and this is Keep It On the Line. So,
Yes,
we kind of deal with with the tough topics, and we say some of the harsh things,
Yes,
some
sir.
of the things that we say around our kitchen table,
Yes,
but are afraid to say in public. And one of the things that I constantly hear, particularly with judges, you find that they make deals with one prosecutor or one defense attorney versus another based on skin color, based on economic background. You know, you're sitting on the bench. You know, what type of format are you gonna have in terms of, you know, when we want to barter for someone's freedom?
Well, the first thing that I would tell you is I'm very proud to tell you that I'm running as an independent. And the reason I think that's important is because I think politics have a place in our system, but not in our legal system. I don't think politics belong in the courtroom. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's so important that we look, you know, not at the parties, not at the Republicans, not at the Democrats, but we look at the candidates.
Okay.
Strip them down and look at them very closely. What has been their contact with our community? What is their history? What is their experience? Are they in the courthouse every day? Do they know what's going on? Are they aware of what's going on with the bonds? And it's something that I think that the more that we put on our judges as far as looking at their background and their experience that way, I think that, you know, we'll do a lot better. I believe that any person that comes in front of a judge should be treated with dignity and respect. And I can tell you that down in our courthouse, that's not happening every day.
No, it's not.
You know, a judge should be patient. You know, take the time to listen, okay? Again, when judges make a decision right off the, you know, the cuff of their sleeve, a lot of times it's got to be thought out. Right now, I have the advantage of having a staff and having, you know, we have a felony staff and then we also have a municipal court. And one of the things I did was pull in the team leaders of that staff and said, if you had to choose or create the next judge, what kind of things would you look at? And the first thing they said is we want to walk in a courtroom where someone is actually going to listen to our argument, not already pre-decide what the resolution's going to be.
Right.
And for me, that was kind of a no-brainer because it's too many times that I've had the opportunity, and I represent a lot of people who've made poor judgment and are guilty of the case, and you're trying to find, you know, a fair resolution. But there are many, many times that I represent people that I truly believe are innocent, that the fact pattern and so forth truly shows that they're innocent. And I think you have to have the patience not to rush to judgment. You have to have the patience to not listen to an attorney because of their status, but listen to every case and listen to every attorney because it's not the attorney that you're judging that client.
Right.
So, you know, just basic respect and treating people with dignity. And again, justice, equal and exact justice for all, regardless of your race or your party or your socioeconomic background or your gender or, you know, any of those things. So again, just in my background, those are, you know, things that I think that I would bring to the bench if given the opportunity.
And you're going to get that opportunity.
I certainly hope so.
I believe so. So let's move to another subject. And I know that you've dealt with this Ray Tinsley situation. You've talked about it extensively, and I don't want to really box you in, but I know that it's a question that some of our viewers are dying to hear. You know, that they'd like to hear your take as to, number one, why, in your perception, wasn't he found guilty? Number two, why not try him again?
Well, first and foremost, I think what people have to understand is right now the standard that we have for lethal uses of force by police is a very high standard. The United States Supreme Court determines that under an unreasonable seizure standard. So with that being the case, if a police officer believes that a defendant or a suspect will cause him great bodily harm or death, or a person in the community great bodily harm or death, that officer is justified in using lethal force. Now, the problem is you can't look at it in retrospect. So say the officer thought something was going on and he made a mistake. No, what the law says is you have to look at it through the lenses of another officer who has the same training and the same information that person has. So say you had an officer that was mistrained. Well, you have to look at it through an officer's eyes who was mistrained. That's a very difficult standard to prove. And the complications with it is, if you understand how the Supreme Court works, you don't just, get arrested and your case goes to the Supreme Court. It's appeals, and the Supreme Court has to accept the case. and so forth. So I think that's one of the issues that you see across the nation, why it's so difficult to get these convictions. The second thing is, and I think the prosecutor said it himself, is that race comes into play.
Right, absolutely.
Implicit, explicit bias absolutely comes into play. And that's what concerns me about these cases. You know, as a nation right now, we are separated by races. None of us like it. We would like to all be one, but we see things differently. And unless and until people can talk about their implicit and explicit biases, unless and until we can work through those, I think we're going to see more of these. And you hate that it's going to happen. But again, in every other situation, when a person takes a gun, points it at your head, pulls a trigger and say that I did it on purpose, every day down in our courthouse, that's murder. Absolutely. Unless and until you prove that it was justified by law. Okay? It's no question. That's a murderous act unless it's self-defense, justified use of force, or something like that. So, you know, a lot of times you hear people criticizing the prosecutor about that being a murder charge. I don't know what else to call that. You know, I would hear about reckless and those kind of things. I don't understand what's reckless about saying I intended to pull my gun out and shoot you in the head. Right. That's an intentional act. Right. You know, my clients, when they're charged with that, that's an intentional act. Absolutely. Okay. So absolutely. Again, those are, you know, my concerns, the high standard of what must be proven in order to convict a police officer with using, you know, unjustified use of force. And then the second thing is just, and again, this is not me. I didn't try that case. I watched it as an analyst. Right. But our prosecutor, who's had his team involved in it twice, says flat out that race was the problem. That certain jurors just were not going to convict a white police officer for shooting and killing a black man. Right. And again, it's not anything that I want to hear, but, you know, I listen to the press conference, I read the news clippings, I have my own thoughts on it. But, you know, I think those are some of the issues that, you know, challenge this case.
Yeah, and I think that living in this city and living in this climate today, as a black man, I myself, you know, I ask, is this another validation for open season on black males in this country?
It's scary.
I mean, you know,
because what do you tell your children? You know, your first thing is, well, you tell them to fully comply. Well, you see incidents where there's substantial compliance. It may not have been 100%, but I've seen a 98% compliance and a person has ended up shot and killed. Right. So it's a scary situation. Right. So, you know, it's one that we got to get a grip on. As a community, we got to find a way to come together. Right. Or, you know, it's going to be a lot more protests and a lot more lost life for things that shouldn't happen in my eyes.
Absolutely. And just one other thing on that subject, and we'll move on. But when we talk about, I heard F. Lee Bailey speak before. It was during, I believe it was the Hustler trial. And they were talking about the over-indictment, the indictment process, particularly here in Cincinnati. And he was referring to the amount of indictments. For instance, and I know in some of our more common cases with grassroots individuals, you know, they're constantly over-indicted. Why wasn't there more on the indictment?
The part of the problem is what the prosecutor takes an oath to is you're supposed to charge what the evidence dictates that you charge. And I mean, it's really a good question because that's a question that you get from the community all the time. The problem is you got to understand, and as a criminal defense attorney, I don't want to see defendants getting over-indicted because that's something that I deal with daily. And for the most part, you know, 95% of the time, defendants don't look like Ray Tenzing.
Exactly.
Okay? Exactly. So I want them to be charged with what the evidence dictates that they should be charged with. Exactly. So, you know, again, and the way the law works is lesser included offenses. If the evidence bears it out, a judge is required to give that instruction. But what I would hate to see is if a black man is killed by a police officer, he gets charged with reckless homicide. But if a black man kills another black man, it's murder. Or if a black man kills a white man, it's murder. It's murder. Because to me, what that's doing is devaluing that black life in that situation. Exactly. So I think that we got to stay the course, and we got to be consistent. Don't get me wrong. But what I would hate to see happen is we're starting to charge people based off of what a jury would convict them of.
Okay.
Because again, for me as a defense attorney, now you're moving the ball. Let's charge what the evidence dictates. And if he's guilty of it, he's guilty of it. If he's not, he goes home and he moves on with his life. But what we can't start to do is create legal fictions where we're just doing this so that we can get a conviction, because it's not going to just stop with Officer Tenzing. Then you got to begin to worry about what happens when it's you that's down there.
That's right.
Okay, you were driving 5 miles over the speed limit, but they want to charge you with 20 because somebody will convict you of that.
Right.
It's a slippery slope that we got to be careful, before we take that step down that road.
Absolutely. We're running out of time, but I just, and time just flew by.
It absolutely
This
did.
is such an interesting topic, such a great guest to have on our show. One quick thing, and we'll move on, and that's the murder within our own community.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not going to ask you your professional feelings. I'm going to ask you your feelings as Rodney Harris. What do we do, Rodney?
First thing I think we got to do as leaders in the community, as mentors in the community, we got to get in touch with our community. Okay? One of the reasons I'm so committed to it is because I have a 13-year-old and an 18-year-old, 13-year-old young man and an 8-year-old young girl. And I want this community to be better for them. So I think as a mentor, as a leader, as just as a man living in Cincinnati, Hamilton County, we got to get involved. Okay? We got to know our kids. We got to know who their friends are. We got to know what they're talking about. And it's not got to be anything where we spying on them, but be a part of their life. Okay? When you walk into the community, they should know Mr. Harris. They should know Mr. Carter. Again, so we can help build relationships and give them direction and show them other ways. And and that may not correct everything, but I think that's a start.
And I think that's the way to groom some future judges, some future Rodney Harrises. We need our youth to start having more dreams than just, shooting basketball.
And buying a new car.
Yeah. Just hanging out, just with your pants sagging and whatnot. But seriously, we need to have some different thoughts. We need to feed our children different information other than what they've been being fed.
Absolutely.
And it starts with us.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a perfect example of what hard work and determination can bring about. This is Rodney Harris. Rodney, tell us, we know that you're running for judge.
Yes, sir.
So what else do you have going on? Where can we find you? What do you need us to do?
Well, first thing that you can do is spread the word. I'm running for Hamilton County Municipal Court Judge for District 2. It's a very diverse and large district. I'm excited about it. The other thing that you can do if you're interested is get on our website at rharrisforjudge.com. If you want to put a yard sign in your yard, there's a place. If you want to volunteer, there's a place. If you want to donate, there's a place for that. We can accommodate all that on the website. And then also check out our Facebook page.
Y'all check him out, okay? Stay with him. We're going to run some information about Rodney Harris. This has been Britton NewOne Carter, and I'm sorry, y'all. We out of time. We got to go. We out of here.
Thank you so much for having me.